All right, everybody, welcome back to another episode of Around the Draft. It's just Dalton and me this time. Jake had other stuff going on. Tried to get someone else in here that has some ties to what we're doing today, but it'll just be Dalton and I, which is honestly the way we yap, Dalton. I think that's probably plenty. I think we'll have plenty to
Yeah.
talk about. So, but before we get into anything with what our show is going to be about today, which if you're looking at the title, it's another of our 3 round mock drafts, which have been a lot of fun, despite PFF constantly trying to create the greatest running teams of all time every episode of this for some reason, which
Yeah.
I respect, but I'm like, I don't know if I can buy it, happening necessarily, but they
Yeah.
certainly try.
Although allegedly
Mhm.
all the combine chatter is that apparently there's gonna be 3 running backs going day one.
The way those guys are running,
Yeah.
I didn't working out. I wouldn't be that shocked about it at this point because it's in a weaker draft a little bit overall. If you're good enough running back, you might get a shot late in the first,
Yeah.
especially later in the first round. Genty could go high, I think, still, but we'll see about that. But that's actually what I was going to say is before we jump into what we're going to be doing today, mostly, let's talk a little bit about the combine. Now, we didn't do anything combine specific, just kind of wanted to let that happen, let that marinate a little bit, and then whatever we felt like was worthy talking about, we could talk about a little bit. So I'll throw it over to you, Dalton, first. Like any specific either players, storylines that we've been hearing out of the comment, anything that interests you the most, you'd want to talk about here a little bit.
So I think the edge guys were interesting at the top because there are 2 guys at edge that I think were interesting. Abdul Carter.
Mm-hmm.
I think the injury news is very interesting, especially I think both of us, following Penn State pretty closely.
Yeah.
We've seen that from Carter throughout his career, some
Yeah.
injury concerns. So I think him possibly needing surgery. I still think he's probably a top 5 pick. But
I will say the last I heard is that he's not getting surgery and may test at the pro day,
yeah,
which is a good sign for him because
Yeah.
if he's able to test, that means at least shouldn't be a concern, at least right off the bat. But obviously, the injuries are still a concern with him a little bit, but that's at least, I think, encouraging for his chances to still go very high.
Yeah. And we've all seen that despite him having a lot of injuries in college,
yeah,
with one arm, he still dominated the whole
Yeah.
college football playoff.
right.
So I don't think that's a huge concern, but I do think that might move him a little closer to 2, 3, and 4, like those guys. And I'll tell you what, I think we'll talk about it more when we get into our edge show.
Yeah, a couple weeks here,
but James Pierce, really impressive combine. I mean,
a little bit.
Man.
Here's the thing with him ultimately, and this is just because you brought him up, this is the only thing I'll mention with him. Outside of the apparent that he may be an absolute asshole, which honestly I care very little about that unless it's criminally asshole, right? Because there's a lot of guys who are really nice guys outwardly in the league, and then you find out maybe not so good elsewhere. But if you just suck kind of, but you also are just an asshole and not a criminal, I can live with that.
Yeah.
Some teams need a little bit of that, right? Just somebody that they just all right, fine, go put that anger out on the field. But with Pierce, the nice thing with him is that, and I've gotten into the edges a little bit. I'm going to focus on them first before I get to linebackers. But if you're going to be a speedy, true, turn the corner type of edge rusher, you better be fast and you better be explosive. And he looks it on tape, and then he showed it at the combine. So that's huge box checked for him. Because again, this is not a guy that I view as speed to power is there a little bit, but he is a little bit more wiry, so he has to get around corners quickly, be able to speed past offensive tackles, and he showed it in college and showed it at the combine too. So that's a good check for him for sure.
Yeah. Speaking of that area, Deion Campbell, that lateral movement, that. I already had him pegged as a green dot guy at the next level. I think what he did in those drills really kind of solidified that he is a true sideline to sideline middle linebacker.
I think the thing with him too, and I haven't gotten to the linebackers at all yet, but him coming in weighing under 240, him doing so well in the more fluid, the things that are more meant to show how fluid you are as a mover, tells me that yes, you could bring him off the edge sometimes, and he has that background. This is a guy who's become a linebacker while at Alabama, right? And I think that's good for him ultimately because as an edge rusher at that size, he has the athletic traits to make that work. I think if he wanted to do that or if a team wanted him to do that, but he is just more like a modern linebacker. He's built more like that now. He's actually a little bigger than a lot of the guys that are playing linebacker in the league now at 235, which still feels weird to say a little bit, but it's true at this point. I think it just is.
Weird position now.
It is. It's kind of like it feels like you're either like a heat-seeking missile type, like a Patrick Queen, or you're like a really heady, like sturdy player that you're not going to be flashy, but you're going to make the smart plays, like a Jack Campbell type. Like those seem to be kind of the archetypes. And then you have the Fred Warners of the world who are just great at everything that they do on the field. But in general, you're kind of looking for an archetype at linebacker a lot of the time. It's not the specific like field general type anymore. But Campbell has all the skill set, and he's big enough to kind of be more of that type. Not necessarily a throwback by any means, because this is still a smaller player than back in the day. But he's a guy that can move, do everything you want him to do, and has pass rush versatility. So which you never hate. But I know someone I wanted to bring up because two players in particular, because of just how well they tested at their size in general, being offensive linemen, but also just their future position in the NFL. Will Campbell tested how he needed to test if he's going to start at tackle in the NFL. Like that's how you have to test, in my opinion, to have a lot of teams be willing to fail you at tackle before they play you at guard. Yeah. Because although we talked about this in our offensive line rankings, I do think he can play tackle. And this was before any of the measurements came out, despite the fact he has some shorter arms, the whole 9 yards. But if you're going to play tackle with that build, you have to be a great athlete. And there was times where he showed it and times where I thought he didn't. Yeah. But he certainly is one. Like, you can't really argue that at this point. So that was awesome for him. And then Armand Membu, what a freak.
Oh, my God.
What an absolute freak. That's a tackle, man. I'm sorry. Yeah. Like, you want to look at somebody who's 330 plus, has the arm length for it, and can move like that. Yeah, that dude's playing right tackle for me until he can't. Yeah. That's just my thing with it. But
also, moving that well, make a hell of a fucking guard.
Well, that's what I said. Both of them might technically be better in terms of like the rest of their peers in the NFL at guard. But I think you got to let them fail at tackle, though.
That's
because
fair.
You just don't find guys that are the type of movers that often at tackle. And then also with Membu, like at that size at tackle, despite being shorter, it just is I love that combination, if you can get it, of a guy who's a little bit shorter but still lengthy and has a really well-built frame but can move well enough to play tackle. Because I feel like those guys they win the leverage battle so often, right? It's just really easy for them to do that, especially as rushers tend to get a little bit shorter and more like kind of compactly built. It feels like more and more where you get those like 6'2" guys or 245 that can bend around it. Like you need to have somebody who can win that leverage advantage still a little bit better, and those guys can do it. So I think, and Campbell's not like overly tall either, which is nice, I think, for him too. But those guys, I think, both kind of cemented that they should be given the opportunity to play tackle first, unless they get drafted to a team that clearly doesn't need the tackle help right now and they just can't help but take them. Then sure, play them at guard. But I think tackle needy teams can feel pretty good about giving them a chance to tackle.
Yeah.
So, which I thought was huge for them. Other things I wanted to mention for sure, dude, this group is fast this year in general. A lot of these guys. Like, I wasn't necessarily expecting that as much as we got. Like, I knew some of the running backs were going to run better than a lot of running backs typically do. We had a lot more guys who kind of have that more like scat-backed like build and style to them, so I felt like they would run a little bit better. I will say
long speed was impressive.
Right, that's the thing. Like, I will say, like, I know that I was higher on him, I think, than both you and Jake, but RJ Harvey, man, I know he might be like, I don't know how old he is still. I have to see if we found that out. That dude can scoot. He can scoot, man. I'll tell you what. Like, that's just one name. A bunch of guys ran really. Bashal Tootin. Yeah. We know what he is, though. Like, that's the thing with him is, like, a lot of people were like, oh, he's going to have this huge combine. I'm like, well, yeah, he better, because that's who he is. He is an explosive athlete who, if you put him in a zone scheme, when he does hit the hole right, he's probably going to score. And that's awesome. Like, you take that in the middle rounds because you want that explosiveness. But it didn't change anything for me, I don't think. Like, that's kind of the thing. Like, you see guys like, oh, they're risers. It's like, no, he just showed that, like, this is who he is. Like, that's what we expected. It's when guys do something you don't expect. Like, is someone who, and I mentioned this to you in our chat on Twitter, as someone who has Matthew Golden, wide receiver 1, I did not see 4.29 coming. I'll tell you that much. Now, I think he's more of a 4.4 guy on tape. So, you take that where you will. But the fact he's got 4.29 in there is interesting to me, to say the least.
Yeah. And conversely, Isaiah Bond did not expect 4.39.
Yeah, which, I mean, here's the thing. If you would have told me before the combine that Isaiah Bond ran a 4.39, I'd be like, yeah, it's a really good time for a speed threat. Like, it was nothing spectacular. I've been like, all right. But the fact that he said he was going to break the record beforehand, that's why I'm like, man, bless you. But that's why, that's why I'm like, man, you shouldn't have said that unless you knew you had it in you. Because what was he testing like in his testing? Because he had to be at least sub 4.3 in testing to say that, right? Like, it was just a weird
someone
thing.
hand timing him that
Or
was
something.
giving him something.
I don't know, but again, like he's fast, man. He still had the fastest top speed in the 40, I think, of the receivers. So like we know he can run, but like that was a little like if you'd have told me that Matthew Golden ran a 1/10 of a second faster than Bolden did in the 40, I would have been like, what are you talking about? Like what's going on? So that was an interesting thing too. The receivers ran really well. A lot of guys I'm going to definitely go back and watch that I either haven't watched yet, a receiver, especially some corners too. Guys that I just want to go back and kind of see if I see some of the speed, because there's a couple guys that ran better than I thought they would that I'm like, let's see if I could see that on tape, a couple more games watched or something like that. But
yeah. A couple other guys that I think hurt their stock.
There's a couple
this week. Harold Fannin Jr.
Yeah,
he can't run that slow and be the archetype that he is.
See, the only thing I'll say is that Isaiah likely didn't run well either, and that's kind of who I want him to be, is Isaiah Likely. So I'm hoping that he can be that.
Bigger, isn't he?
I think he was about 6'3", 6'4", like 240 something. Mm-hmm. I thought. So maybe he's a little bit bigger now, but like I felt like in the comment I'd have to look it up and see, but I think he ran slower than people thought. Like he was that true receiving tight end type. I'm hoping he can be Isaiah Likely, because if he is, I think he's worth going as early as we've talked about him going. But it was not. I wanted to see more. I will give you that. And then, admittedly, I did find this out. The Gunnar Helm apparently jacked his ankle on the first attempt at the 40.
That's fair.
So, like, his 40 was so bad where I'm like, that dude's not a 4.9, 4.8 guy.
No, that dude hurt.
Yeah, and then I'm like, okay, that makes so much more sense. Because I'm like, there's no – granted, the tight ends did not run well. Somehow Terrence Ferguson, who I do like a lot, as we did on the tight end show, had the best 40 there, I think, which was still not anything special. It was like a 4.64 or whatever, but still pretty good for him, I thought.
Yeah, tell you what, Tyler Warren, I think, could have made himself some money had he run.
That's the thing.
He would have been the fastest tight end in that group.
I feel pretty confident he would have gone sub 4.6, which, like, that's all you had to do, which is, like, I guess, like, again, this is tight end. We're not talking about receivers or running backs here, but, like, still, like, no one going sub 4.6, like, even the smaller tight ends. Yeah, it's not like Stoll ran really poorly, and I'm like, dude, you can't run poorly at 240, like soaking wet. You can't do that. Like, there's some of these guys, they need to figure that out.
I think him being that much bigger than a lot of the tight ends in this group and stronger, I think he would have tested. He would have looked like a real freak.
Yeah,
had he tested.
Yeah. No, I know Loveland, I think, is beat up and he had surgery or something like that, I think. So that makes sense for him.
Also isn't like he's a exceptional athlete for a traditional tight end.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Like, he'll measure pretty well, but like, I don't know. I think Warren could have really, really opened some eyes.
Yeah, Loveland is more smooth to me than necessarily like uber explosive, which at tight end I don't care as much about. Ideally, like I'd rather you be very fluid ultimately if you have the option between the two. But tight end group didn't really show up too well, and that's really the only group that I would say I'm disappointed. Other than the fact the quarterbacks didn't do anything. Tell me why Jalen Milroe wasn't running his ass off.
I don't know. Did he run the 40 at all?
No, he didn't. He didn't do any testing except for on the field drills.
I don't get that either. Unless he doesn't want to get turned into a running back.
Right, but here's the thing. You at least might as well go out there and show people just how much of a freak you are. Because guess what? A lot of quarterbacks now are freaks.
Yeah.
So you might as well.
That's the only way he's going day two.
That's my thing. Like, at least go out there and, like, we know he's a freak, but, like, just show it. Like, honestly, part of it is I just want to see him run because I'm curious what it would have been. I think he could have gone sub 4.4. I really think he could have. Like when you watch him pull away from dudes in the SEC at times at Alabama, you're like, all right, like. So I just want to see it, frankly. So maybe that's just me being a little bit like disappointed about it. But I think it legitimately like it's something that can help you a little bit. Like you're not a first round pick. You're not like go out there and do everything you can do. That's what I would do.
Anthony Richardson probably doesn't go top 10 without his combine.
Probably not, because it just reinforced like, yeah, this is a freak among freaks, and like that matters in this type of stuff. Like the combine doesn't matter as much as I think some people think it does, and especially like nowadays people know that I think more and more. But it still means something. They wouldn't do it at all if it wasn't somewhat important. Like, right, and it's just a good way to get measurables on guys, especially guys who you maybe don't know as much about or don't have as much tape out there or whatever, didn't produce as much. Like how much of a freak are they actually, and where are you willing to take a chance on them? That's where this is for.
Speaking of measurables, Mason Graham.
Yeah.
The boy is not 300 pounds.
Just listen, the tape is what it is. He's a very good player. We've talked about that in the interior defensive line group. But this is, again, an example of, like, this is why he isn't a, like, slam dunk top 10 pick to me. Because it's not that he isn't a very good player, but even on tape, to me at least, I know a lot of people, and we were kind of in the minority, I think, at this point on him in terms of, like, how highly we would take him. But this is an example of why, like, he isn't a freak at all. He just isn't. And that's okay. You don't have to be a great player. But if you're going to go in the top 10 as a defensive tackle, you better have something about you that is just different.
Yeah, there's just not that, like, I know I said it the other week, but, like, what gave a guy like Derek Brown top 10 tape was him throwing opposing offensive linemen at the quarterback. Like, that was
he was just a different level of strength and ability as a run defender, and he had the power as a pass rusher to at least impact the pocket.
Yeah. Graham's not doing that.
It's just not the same type of player. Like, that's why I had Harmon over him, because I think the upside is higher with him. I think the floor is definitely higher with Graham, but like Harmon went out there, tested extremely well, looked very fluid for a guy who was kind of more of a nose tackle type this time last year, right? Like to me, I think that matters more. Now, Graham would have probably tested pretty well because he probably dropped a little bit of weight, because I think he's at least closer to 300 than his listed weight was.
He better get his agent better be telling people that he took a 15-pound shit.
Gotta be, right? Because, like, I think he did want to test, from what I remember, and then I think he had a hamstring or something happen, or Kenneth Grant, both of them had some sort of thing. I think his might have been a heel or something, but something was up where he couldn't test, right? Now, if he would have gone out and tested extremely well, and then you saw the weight, you're like, okay, he just dropped some weight to test well. Like, you can excuse that a little bit. But he can't be much more than 300 pounds as playing weight if he's dropping to 292.
Like, that's what it's like. He's not anywhere near 320.
I just don't think so, man. Like, maybe 305 at the heaviest, I would guess.
Yeah.
And for him to do what he did in run defense at that size, that is very impressive, right?
Yeah.
But he's 300 pounds. Like, that's why it's not the Derek Brown situation, right? Or it just isn't. So, but yeah, combine was very fun. Love to watch it every year. Usually it's right around my birthday, which is really cool. So I got to kind of hang out on Sunday, watch the offensive line. That was very fun for me, of course, as a former offensive lineman. Yeah, thank you very much. Getting closer to 30, Dalton. I don't love it. Don't love it. Yeah. I hate that for years now, all these guys have been significantly younger than me. It used to be more fun when they weren't.
Yeah.
But hey,
not everyone. Not Tyler Show.
Hey, he's somehow still younger than me, so we're
but closer.
It's closer than it has any right to be. But this is also the guy that backed up Justin Herbert at one point in college.
Oh my God, that's right.
Yeah, that might be the funniest stat or story that's going to come out of the draft.
That's wild.
Because again, Justin Herbert's on his second NFL contract, right? Not his first, even as a first round pick. He's on his second NFL contract at this point. Besides the point. I think we kind of covered a lot of the main stuff from the combine. Unless there's anything else you want to throw out. A lot of this stuff will probably come up when we get into the mock, because that will affect things a little bit for us. But
only other thing, Cam Scatterboo, you got to run.
Yeah, run. Especially because he jumped out of his shoes.
Yeah,
because if he would have run a sub 4.6, even I'd be like, cool.
I think they said there was a hamstring issue.
Maybe. I think Samson had the same thing or something like that too.
But like he better run it his fucking pro day because you can't. He needs to have a like professionally timed 40.
I think he does because it's just I'm so curious. But again,
Yeah.
with the explosiveness testing, I'm like he could if he goes sub 4.6, I'm on board.
Yeah, same.
Because at that point, like Caleb Johnson ran a 4.5 something, and like but it's just because he doesn't get up to speed fast enough.
He would be either a late day 2 or early day 3 guy. Right now, he's like more like a middle of the pack day 3 guy.
That's where I'm at too, because I just need to see. I need to see how much because with the way he plays, it is mitigated. Obviously, that's why it's not as much of a problem as it would be for other players. But I just want to know what does that top end speed actually look like because you just don't get to see it a lot from him with the way he plays. You just don't. So it's just something it's a data point we don't really have a good thing for with him right now. So hopefully he runs, but yeah, with the way the other running backs were running there for the most part, I get why, especially if he was healthy enough to do it. Watching those guys, I'd be like, yeah. I mean, who was it? I think Judkins ran like a 4.46 or something like that. I was like, damn, okay. I thought you were more 4.5 guy.
Wild.
Oh yeah, those dudes are flying.
I think Mike McDaniel lost his mind. Just puts him salivating over Travion Henderson.
You can only have so many running backs, Mike. I'm sorry. You got to. I know you're getting rid of Mostert. You got to get rid of a couple more. You got to get a couple off the roster. You just drafted the Tennessee kid last year. Let's relax. All right. Like, please draft an offensive. That's still the thing. Yeah. That when we get to the draft, right? I know that you probably won't get to be around for much of the draft if at all. We do our live show, but if the Dolphins don't take at least a trench player at pick 13, I'm gonna flip out on stream. Like I'm gonna get angry, and it's about a team I don't even care that much about. But it's just so stupid. You know what I mean?
Protect this kid.
Literally, like I just don't want to see the little guy die. All right, let's do something about it. Let's at least make an effort, because paying the 6 games a year of Teron Armstead you get is not cutting it. I'm sorry, Chris. You can't keep doing this shit. Your center weighs 270 pounds. Stop fucking around. What are we doing? Like, I can't wait. I can't wait to see them take like a receiver or some bullshit and then like trade Tyreek Hill, which like fine.
They gotta
which like fine in that case, but you don't need more. I'm sorry, you don't need all the fast receivers on the planet.
That'll be their pick. It'll be Matthew Golden.
Which honestly, don't actually. I don't care if I like him a lot. Stop it. Anyway, let's the 3-round mock for the NFC West. Again, we're going to be doing, if you've seen our 3-round mocks before, for divisions, we're going to be doing the NFC West this time around with the AFC West coming up next week, which hopefully Jake will be around for because we've got to have the 2 Raiders guys on for that, of course. But let's jump into that here. So let me pull that up. And, of course, hopefully PFF doesn't dick around too much like they typically do, but I guess we'll see. That should be fun to find out. So we'll jump into draft here, which I made this comment earlier before we got on, Dalton, but it feels weird still, even though I know this is the case, that the Niners are the first team we're going to be picking for in this. I did not expect that to be the case if you would have asked me that before the season, but things obviously went kind of haywire for them. We'll see what they kind of do. The Deebo Samuel trade has now been made. I'm kind of okay with the Steelers not being the team that got him just because I still don't know if we would have used him that well, but good for the Commanders. You have the money. You have a rookie quarterback. Get guys who can make plays for you potentially. So forgot to mention that before we got kicked off here. But, Dalton, let's jump into this here. I'm very curious because I don't know if they've made any adjustments over PFF with the Combine being factored in. Did they move guys around a little bit? Did they adjust logic a little bit based on what they were hearing at the Combine? I don't know. But
they fixed actually I did see a clip. I think they did actually, now you say it, because I saw a mock that had like Shador falling. I think it was like Shador was like falling to 11.
Yeah, I've heard stuff about like, especially people are saying from the Combine that despite us not feeling quite the same way, and I'm kind of, again, you could kind of go either or with those two. The NFL seems very firm in their stance that Cam Ward is the best quarterback in this class, which doesn't surprise me considering the type of players that you guys are.
I think we're seeing lying season.
I think there's definitely an element of that, but it would not surprise me if 75% of teams would have Cam Ward as QB1 just because of the type of player that you could be getting with him. Because we know teams prioritize traits at the quarterback position. We know that about them. So it wouldn't surprise me if that's the case, basically, is what I'm saying. That doesn't mean Shooter isn't going to go very high still.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean he won't go high in this mock that we're about to do because we're not going to be in control of that for the most part anyway. But it's just something to note that everyone seems to be saying that, and that doesn't mean anything. It's barely March yet, so we'll see what happens closer to April. But let's jump into the start this here. Now let's see just kind of what we're working with here. So Travis Hunter goes number 1. Okay. Cam Ward to the Browns, which I do think in this situation, if I personally think if one of Hunter or Carter are the first picks, I do think that Ward will go to the Browns. That's kind of where I'm at with that. I think that that's who they would end up taking. Maybe they don't necessarily want to do that, but when your quarterback is Deshaun Watson, he isn't actually even playing for you. You kind of, what are you going to do? You can't pay a free agent quarterback any serious money.
Yeah.
Because how are you going to do that? You're already paying another guy serious money. You're going to trade Myles Garrett, but that's actually going to be not financially very responsible for you to do when that happens, I think. So it's just a whole mess for them. That makes sense. But Luther Burden
at 4, someone's getting fired. You take a slot receiver at 4.
I almost wonder if we should should we restart this one to see, because I don't know how that happened.
Yeah.
But
also, Will Johnson just
on
the board.
That I do. That's the general consensus among everybody, is that he's not going in the top 10. Which I haven't gotten to corners at all. I've not watched Will Johnson, especially from this past year. I watched a little bit of him last year, but that seems to be the consensus, is that he's probably not a top 10 pick.
He's number 2 overall on my big board.
I know you're going to be very different, but I'm not sure where I'm at with that yet. But I imagine he'll be at least probably a little bit higher than a lot of people seem to have him. But we'll see when we get to that point. But that doesn't surprise me much in this mock. So, but Genty on the board. That'd be funny if the Niners just said, well, Christian McCaffrey doesn't exist basically most of the time right now. Not sure what his knees are doing.
Yeah.
But no, I think realistically, looking at who's on the board here, Will Johnson makes the most sense, I think, right off the bat.
I think so. Just because, they use some secondary help.
Yeah, they're losing Charvarius Ward most likely. I mean, this whole situation for them is very sad, but I don't think he'll be playing in the state of California, at least not as a team that's in California, from what I've heard from him, with situation with his family, which I totally understand. So losing him, you get a guy that is not dissimilar to him, I think, in terms of play style and size, that type of build. I think it's a kind of a seamless fit. And if he's going to be here, which, again, that is the consensus, it seems like, is that he likely could be, makes a lot of sense.
By far best player available here.
Well, Genty being, he's a running back, so that kind of makes it, complicated, but, it's still, with positional importance factored in, I would say so as well. Let's go with Johnson again. Just to reiterate, this is going to be what we would do mock draft. We don't have to necessarily follow what we're hearing, seeing, what we think teams are going to do. This is just what we do on the clock at these picks. So, hey, Falcons fans, you didn't draft a receiver or a running back or a quarterback. Now, I love that meme of people being like, what skill position player the Falcons going to take despite not needing any really at this moment in time. No, but that wouldn't be a terrible pick, I don't think.
Yeah, they would take Genty out there.
They would, just to be like, how many running backs can we roster that all need a ton of touches and none of them get them? That would be what they would do. No, Cardinals up here at pick 16. Looking at, so Kenneth Grant is definitely an interesting one. Definitely needs some more beef in the middle of that defense. Edge is still definitely important there too, because they get edge production, it feels like, every year, but it's never in a normal way. They kind of just throw bodies at the position and they get a decent amount of sacks, but they're not getting consistent pressure. Tackle is definitely something they could look at, opposite Paris Campbell. Kind of looking at the board here.
I think offensive line makes a lot of sense.
It does,
because you gotta at least be able to run the ball and protect Kyler Murray.
Yeah, because Connor was extended, which I think was smart because he's still playing. He's the type of running back that can play into his 30s because he's never been fast, so it doesn't matter. If he loses a little bit of juice, it's not like there's a lot to begin with. So you have Trey Benson, who you drafted last year as well, to kind of complement him. That running game, I think, has a chance to be very good. So with the guys on the board here, I mean, the highest ranked I have is Banks, but with the way Membu tested and the way he was looking, and the fact he has positional versatility, I think for sure. Whereas like a guy like Banks, you think he has it, but you don't know for sure. That's probably the name I immediately gravitate towards. But I'm curious if you have a different thought there.
My top lineman here would be Ursary, but I know you're a lot lower on him, and everyone else seems to be.
I worry. There's a couple of things with him I just worry about a little bit. I'm not gonna lie, but I do get it. He tested pretty well. It's more like stuff that's theoretically correctable with him. I don't think he plays on balance well enough a lot of the times. I think he's on the ground a lot for a guy that is as big and strong as he is. Like it's little like there's things that it could end up being nothing for me, but I've seen that happen with a couple of guys and it gives me pause. But any of these tackles like fit or honestly interior guys kind of fit for what the Cardinals could use. So
yeah, I'd be good with either Banks, I think, or if we wanted more versatility, we go maybe like a Donovan Jackson.
That'd be an interesting fit too, because I think the more and more I think with Jackson, I think he's gonna maybe get a shot at tackle for.
Yeah, I think he earned it.
He earned. I think it matters who drafts him, obviously, because I think if you draft him to be a guard, like that's great, right? Because that's what he has been mostly. But I think if you take him with the upside of tackle and then you can fail him there, still get a guard out of it, that also makes a lot of sense. But I think with the guys on the board here, if Banks is one of the guys you would want to go with potentially too, I will just kind of break that tie and go with him as my top offensive tackle there. So, all right. So Genty goes to the Bengals, which I don't think is impossible, despite the fact that Chase Brown did have a good season for them last year. They both actually in this case would have some fumbling potential problems because Genty does have some fumbles in his career. Granted, he does carry the ball a bajillion times, so you kind of have to factor that in a little bit. He's also bouncing off 18 tackles every run play, so it's kind of hard not to eventually fumble. But Seahawks up here at 18, we know what their biggest need is, and again, this is us drafting, so we don't have to pay attention to that. But we know in real life, John Snyder isn't drafting an offensive lineman, especially a guard in the first round. He ain't doing it. Now, you could tell him he's wrong, and you'd be right about that probably, but he's not doing it. But if it's me, I might do it. So that's kind of where I want to look again here too, I think. Let's just bring the offensive line group up again right away. Again, Membu makes a lot of sense for me because you could tell him this tying it into real life. You could say, hey, this guy could be your right tackle if Abraham Lucas can't play at any point or if he just keeps being injured. But he also could just go into guard if everyone's healthy. You can kind of convince him, I think. You're really taking a tackle, but he's going to play guard. Like that's how I think you could maybe get away with it, but that's just kind of me. Same thing with like a Donovan Jackson, that type of guy too. So like someone like that.
Yeah, be good with Jackson. Booker also wouldn't be a bad fit.
No, as a true guard, like for us, like if I'm taking a true guard though, like Booker would be the true guard here, but I'd like the tackles that could then play guard a little bit better than him, like a Membu or even like a Donovan Jackson. I think honestly too, like we just talked about, I think I'd probably pick one of those two over him. So to me, it would just be between at least for the Seahawks, probably between Jackson and Membu. So,
I'd probably go with Jackson then.
Jackson, okay. Let's throw Jackson to the Seahawks. Let's see kind of what we got here. So the Steelers got Shadur Sanders. That's fun.
Wow, good for them.
With the way we're built, I think that would go poorly, but it is what it is.
I think he's steady enough that I think I don't think you're ever going to be, again, worse than a 9-10 win team with him.
Listen, Dalton, we've been getting 9 to 10 wins with Kenny goddamn Pickett in the past.
Yeah.
So what does that really say?
I mean,
I know what you're saying. It's just funny to think about it.
War as a rookie.
Yeah, it's definitely better than what we've been getting, like for
Yeah,
sure. It's
and
just
that's if he's a disappointment.
yeah, that he would find a way to like play really poorly as a rookie, and we again still win like 9 games, and everyone's like,
Yeah,
well, they won because that's what they said with Kenny. Like, oh well, they still won games, and it's like, yeah, but he didn't have anything to do with it other than the occasional fourth quarter touchdown that made no sense. Like that was pretty much it. So maybe you could get the same thing out of Shadur
yeah.
here,
But I don't think
but
he'd have as many bad plays.
no,
And
for
that's the
sure
big
not.
thing.
Right.
He's
It's
not
just
going to lose them games.
no, I don't think so either. That is a funny thing to talk about though with that guy especially. Rams up here at 26. They of course won the division and nearly took out the Eagles before they could go on their just thunderous run to the Super Bowl, which I think is very funny to think about. And then of course the Matthew Stafford thing starts happening. I'm like, are you guys sure you want to do that? Turns out they weren't sure. They in fact didn't want to do that.
Yeah.
So that's good for them.
Why are you trading Cooper Cup then? I just don't get the direction.
I think it's because they want to take a receiver to replace him, Dalton. That's what I think it is, because he is getting older and injured a lot. And Puka himself has already been injured multiple times. So I think they want to
Just
kind of regroup
do
that.
that. What you're gonna get? What a fourth rounder for Cooper Cup?
I wouldn't be surprised
Maybe.
if they get less than that.
Yeah, at that point, like the salary cap's a myth.
This is true. We know this, yeah.
So you don't have to worry about that. Even if Cup ends up being your third receiver, just do that.
I don't disagree with you that much. I really don't. But that seems to be the direction they're going. And that's why I'm about to say, if I was them, I'm taking Matthew Golden. That's what I'm doing. Because he's on the board here. I think that he is the exact type of receiver that would do well for them on the outside, especially. Allow Puka to kind of continue to do the inside out thing where he's great at both spots there. And he's a route runner type that I think would work really well with a quarterback like Stafford, who wants his guys to be in the right place at the right time. We get on a good page with him, and he does bring maybe less speed than the 4.29 suggests, but still a speed element, I think, to that group as well. So that's my immediate thought here. They've invested a lot into the offensive defensive line with both draft picks and money. Let's start kind of getting the cupboard full again with receiver and not hoping that you get a Puka Nacua in the 5th round, which isn't going to happen pretty much ever, except for that.
I don't mind that. I'm curious on what tight ends are on.
Yep, I can definitely pull it because that's not Colson Loveland is here. I will say
that'd probably be the only other
way I get that too. Yeah, one of those two. I think they're going to take a skill position player here. I really do. I will have Golden higher than Loveland, but that's more of a personal preference than necessarily what matters most there.
Yeah, I don't know how much. I still got to figure out where Golden's combine stuff moves him up for me. And I might have to reassess the tape a little bit.
I don't have to worry about that.
Yeah.
So admittedly, I am coming from a place where I don't have to worry about that as much.
Because he was an early second guy for me before this. So I would have probably had Loveland higher, but I don't know how you're very high in Golden. So I get that. That's tricky, yeah.
Because I get the argument for both of them because Loveland, especially like for a tight end in that offense where they haven't really had that with Higbee being banged up a lot in the last few years, never really being the type of dynamic athlete that Loveland can be, that is intriguing as well. Because if you keep Kupp especially, that makes that a little bit easier. But for me, I'm working with the idea that he's not going to be on this football team. I think that makes the receiver position as good as it can be with Puka. The other guys make plays for that team sometimes, but you wouldn't really have a true number 2 that you can rely on, I think, in that situation. Maybe Loveland becomes that, but
do you think they'd be able to get one in the second?
Receiver, you mean?
Yeah.
I think if you want to replace Kupp's like current role, where he's not the same he's not the Triple Crown winner anymore, but he's a really good number 2 receiver, you could go for a Besh. That's going to be linked to them a lot because of the skill set. You could go for someone of that nature that's going to be there probably in the 2nd or 3rd round. I admittedly I have a much higher grade on Golden than both you do and also those receivers. So that's kind of why I'm leaning that way.
I'm all right with going Golden then.
Yeah. But yeah, I just think, again, the skill set makes a lot of sense too, because that's their type of receiver, I think, that can do kind of a little bit of everything. kind of jack of all trades type of guy. Speaking of Jack Besh, goes at 42. So if we had done that experiment, couldn't have done it in this one at least.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's happening necessarily in real life, but interesting here. So let's take a look kind of what we got since the golden pick. So Scorton goes off the board. Ezra to the Lions makes a lot of sense. Hampton to the Commanders. I mean, I like I can't even think of his name right now, the running back. Brian Robinson Jr., I think it is.
Yeah.
I like him. He's not a Marion Hampton. I will say that. And Austin Eckler is a bajillion years old, and if he isn't as old as I think he is, he's slow. So, I can't really complain about that too much. Greg Zabel to the Bills is interesting. It's just
they let the Eagles get Jalen Walker.
And Shamar Stewart goes to the Chiefs in back-to-back picks, which would be really funny. Walker to the Eagles is very funny because he would definitely just be just straight-up edge rusher for them because they don't like linebackers.
And he'd be a tremendous fit for them.
I mean, they basically have the guy that's like 4 years older than him version already on the team in a lot of ways. So that's interesting. Darius Alexander, I'm a big fan of. Goes to the Browns like that. Xavier Watts, Giants makes sense.
Why?
What's up?
Why? Why did the Raiders do that?
Oh, Colston, dude. It's because they're trading Michael Mayer. Didn't you hear? They're trying to trade Michael Mayer.
I heard that.
You know what's better than having 2 great tight ends? 3. That's why they did it.
Well,
no, that's
I
awesome.
have been toying with the idea the last day or two of if both quarterbacks, both corners, and Carter are all off the board.
Okay.
If you just take Tyler Warren and figure it out.
Okay, well, here's the thing. I think what you do is if you do that, or if you take Loveland, that just means Brock Bowers is legitimately just a receiver.
Yeah.
He literally lines up out wide in the slot only.
Which I think
he can. He can. He did it a lot this past year. Why not?
NFL outside corners.
Yeah, because they can't handle the size or honestly the speed in some cases. Because some of these corners don't be fast out here as much as you think they are.
Who was it? Marlon Humphrey earlier in the year.
Yeah, Marlon's known to be every so often, as good as he is, he'll get cooked sometimes. And you're like, what's going on there? George Pickens has got him a couple times. I'm like, I know George is kind of a freak with the spectacular catch stuff, but he'll beat him off the line. And I'm like, what happened there? But admittedly, still very impressive to do that to an NFL corner. But that wouldn't. I'm not gonna defend it anymore. We're just gonna move on. Tyleik Williams, who looked very fluid at the combine. I'm surprised he didn't run because he looked like he would have ran better than I thought he would have. But that's whatever. Trey Amos goes to the Pats here. Josh Connerly goes to the boards. I like that fit because I think you wouldn't have to necessarily play him right away, but he can maybe develop as future left tackle if they decide not to hang on to the guys they have. Yeah. TJ Sanders, also somebody I thought would have tested, but decided not to do so. But Landon Jackson jumped out of the freaking gym. Good for him. He's such a straight line player, though. If you put something in front of this dude, in a straight line, he'll kill it. But if you ask him to turn around, he might take him a minute. That's the only problem with him. But still, good for him. And then, of course, Jack Besher. So we're up with the Niners again. We took Will Johnson, of course, which great steal from Dalton's perspective. And honestly, for now, mine for sure, too. I understand, there's some questions going on, but I don't know if there's that many questions going on to me. Another guy that hasn't gone yet that absolutely will go much earlier than this that I see already on the board, Nick Manwari. What a freak of nature that guy is.
Yeah.
I'm very interested in getting into the safety tape because Stark's disappointed athletic testing-wise, but looked great in the drills and did everything you'd want him to do. But so I don't really worry about him. When I get them, I'm not going to be probably worrying about it too much. But that guy can move at 6'3", 220. That's a special athlete at safety. But looking since we've attacked corner already, they could use interior defensive line help for sure.
Yeah.
Help.
What are the linemen looking like?
That's what I was about to say because they do, despite them kind of being they're not the Dolphins, but they kind of feel like they're just asking their left tackle to be the best player on the field and not worry about it too much. Booker's still here. Ursary is still here, which is definitely we're at the range where even I'm not going to say anything about that.
That would be that'd probably be my pick. I won't be offended if you go Booker, but
but I mean Booker. The problem is I think he's a really good player. if he goes in the first round, he'd be the worst athlete to go in the first round in a while, testing wise. But you also don't care that much at a guard spot as much as other positions. So I don't know if I care that much about it because his pass pro was so good at Alabama. Like, it was very, very good. And I think for a team that kind of struggled in some aspects as a pass protection, they do a lot of stuff similar to the Dolphins to mitigate that. But it still has been rough at times. Like, it just has been. So I get that. But I think Ursary is like maybe the heir apparent to Trent Williams. Makes a lot of sense. Both really big, powerful tackles who are more athletic than you expect them to be, especially in Williams' case. But, Ursary as well. So that, I think, and I know you'd definitely be on board with that too. So I think we'll go there if you're good. Yeah, we'll do that. And that makes a lot of sense. Up on the board now for the Cardinals, the Man Ward goes to the Colts. That definitely feels like their type, big, fast athletes. I wonder if there's any other players on the team that fit that mold that Dalton doesn't think is a real player. But no, anyway. Definitely good group here. So on the up with the Cardinals again here at pick 47. Took Kelvin Banks, dress offensive line, so it makes a lot of sense. I think defensive line is where I want to focus on with this second pick here. They really need kind of guys that are an edge or defensive interior. So let's kind of take a look at the guys that.
Yeah, I already saw who I want.
Okay.
I
know. Yep.
Yeah,
which honestly, for a team that needs guys who can actually like defend the run because they don't really feel like they have them, I wouldn't be that against it. Is all I'm gonna say. Like, I really wouldn't, despite where I had him ranked in my defensive interior. That whole group from I think it was 12 to 7 for me was basically like, take him on day 2 and I'll be like, cool, go for it.
Yeah.
And that's because that's just how this class is for me, where it's like all these guys deserve to go on day 2. You take them in the order you think you need them to be going. Like, that's where I'm at with it.
I think he would make their defense significantly better just because they immediately get better against the run. And I think he would at least – I think at worst, he's going to at least make your edge rushers more productive in the pass rush because I just think he's going to push the pocket at the very least.
Yeah, and again, we're talking about Alfred Collins here out of Texas. For those who didn't check our interior defensive line show out, especially Eyes more so, and then also Jake a little bit more so than me was higher on him too. But you had him at 4, right, Dalton? If I'm not mistaken. Big fan of Collins here. The podcast really in general, like even though I had him 11, it was not really a slight to him. I just kind of view him as kind of a maxed out run defender type. But for a Cardinals team that needs beef in the interior, you don't get much more beef than that, frankly. At least of a guy who can use it. We'll put it that way. So go out for Collins here. I don't have a problem with that. Shamar Turner goes to next pick. That. Oh, by the way, let's see. What did the Dolphins do? Did they make me mad? Let's find out. They took interior. They took 2 defensive tackles so far.
2 defensive tackles.
Yeah. I mean, I guess I can't technically yell at them because they're sort of doing what I said to do. So what am I going to say?
That those defensive tackles aren't going to keep Tua's brain from turning.
You're right, but at this point, if I'm being honest with you, is anything going to? Is anything really going to?
No, it's more of a when, not if thing.
Yeah, when, not if, unfortunately. Also, someone's staring me in the face right away. Now, the problem is they don't really need more corners, but if there's ever been especially old school Seahawks corners, no one has ever been more of a Seahawks corner than Siobhan Rebel out of East Carolina. But they have too many needs elsewhere. I'm looking edge here and linebacker a little bit too. Maybe it might be a little bit early for the linebackers that are still on the board probably, but let's just kind of throw them up here. Schwarzenegger could be a good fit at linebacker for them. I know that they getting that linebacker right in McDonald's scheme seems to be something that's really important to him for sure. So I could see him prioritizing that position or wanting them to. I haven't watched linebackers yet, so I can't speak on whether Schwarzenegger would be worth this pick. I know there's a lot of people who have him in their top 50s, so there is that.
This feels really low for Sawyer.
Yeah.
I know he didn't test super well, but
I will say one of the things I noticed with him already is that I really think his lower half is underdeveloped, and I worry about that at the next level. I know that sounds a little bit weird, but it's just there's not a lot of there's just not a lot of explosiveness with this guy, and like he's not an overpowering edge rusher to overcompensate for that, I think. And I do wonder if he's kind of maxed out his frame already. And it's an interesting. I'm very curious where I'm ultimately going to end up on him, because if I had to peg it right now, I would say he's a late day 2 player for me currently. And this is a good edge class. It doesn't necessarily mean he's not a good player, but I think the college football playoff maybe elevated his status for a bit, and then people are going to get into the full thing with him and be like, I don't know if that's really what he is. But it's interesting though. We'll kind of see where he ends up. I think Birch had a good combine for sure. A lot of these guys had pretty good days, but
is he? I still don't know. It
sure looks like he's trying to be an edge rusher.
Yeah,
with the way he tested.
Play. I don't know what he like.
I don't know either, because he looked like an edge rusher at the combine. He dropped weight to be one. I think that's where he wants to trend. So if that's the case,
I don't see him as a defensive tackle.
Me either. I will say that. Like, I didn't watch him for that group for a reason. Like, I just like I think realistically, if he wants to be an NFL player, especially like a starting capable player, it's got to be as like a bigger edge type.
Yeah.
And he showed the athleticism to do it, to his credit. So it's not quite to the Shamar Stewart level, which was insane, but
those guys find it sometimes difficult to stick.
I know, that's the only problem with him.
If you're not a freak.
I know. I wouldn't categorize him quite that highly.
Yeah.
I will say, like, I keep coming back to just because, again, I haven't gotten to the linebackers yet, so this isn't coming from my own personal evaluations, but Schlesinger does kind of give me the vibes of a guy that McDonald would like as his Mike for his defense. He put on weight for the combine, didn't test, but still with a couple things he did was still looking explosive. Like, I think that he could be a good fit for them here at 50.
Yeah. I don't mind that. I haven't either, but UCLA linebacker, that kind of works.
Yeah, for sure.
Black linebacker.
All right, let's kind of check some of this stuff out here real quick. Cam Scatterboot to the Bills at 56 is fun.
Yeah.
Steelers get Savon Revel, which would definitely happen if he was there. But sorry, what'd you say, Dalton?
That is fun. Scatterboo and Josh Allen in the same backfield.
Yeah, and maybe for a little bit, James Cook until he decides he wants more money than they're willing to pay him. Jaden Higgins, also love that I have him at receiver 7 because he had himself a day. The combine, love that. Booker goes to the Chargers. That's yep, for sure. Strepo to the just another day 2 receiver for the Packers, man. They'll have enough eventually, right? Arroyo to the Texans is interesting for sure.
Well, didn't you hear the Packers are getting a number 1 receiver again already? They're getting Devontae Adams back.
Oh, right. Yeah, for sure. To play with Jordan Love. Yeah, let's do that. That won't be weird.
Could you imagine if they traded for him?
Oh, if they traded – listen, if they cut him, sure. If any team picks up Devontae Adams, if they cut him, like, yeah, man, why not? Who cares? If you trade an asset for this guy at this point – not offense to Adams, it's just like you can't keep getting traded for stuff at this point.
Yeah.
Like it's a lot of money on your contract. Just take a flyer on a team that could recoup your value a little bit. Go play with a good quarterback. Don't play with Aaron Rodgers, by the way, Devontae. I know you're not listening, but if you are, don't follow him wherever he goes, especially because I feel like it might end up being retirement, because who's going to deal with his shit? Because he'd either have to completely change who he is as a person, which basically isn't, I don't think, going to happen, or a team would have to invite the circus into their building. And I think the only team that might be dumb enough to do that is the Giants. And if the Giants do it, I'm just going to be sad for him, honestly. I won't even be like I'll have no feelings other than sadness, frankly. So that's all I have to say about that. But edge rushers from Ohio State go back-to-back, which is cool. Darren Porter. Go ahead.
None. You go.
Darren Porter, Osray Thomas, both go here at corner. Caleb Johnson. Oh, we're doing it again.
Yeah.
We're doing it again. Cam Scatterboo and Caleb Johnson in the same backfield.
Eagles drift 2 edge rushers as well.
I mean, that fits kind of.
Yeah.
I guess a little bit. Anyway, moving on. Benjamin Morrison. I'm curious what happens with him. Trayvon Henderson to the Browns scares me personally as a Steelers fan. So there's that. You get Josiah Stewart, Michigan man. Okay.
I haven't watched him too much yet.
Neither. He's a sawed-off, explosive edge rusher type. So you get with that. Quinshon Judkins, Pats make some sense. Add some more firepower there. Terrence Ferguson, big fan of that with the Jaguars here. Dylan Gabriel, hey, you get quarterback. Man, this Raiders draft makes Dalton want to kill himself, I think, a little bit, possibly.
Just a little bit.
Yeah, he might put himself behind the Dolphins' offensive line next year and just see what happens.
There you go.
Jordan Phillips is 74, by the way. He's a fun player. You can't take that dude in the top 75. You can't take him in the top 100, frankly. He's got interesting measurables, to say the least. So that's all I'm going to say about that. Anyway, Niners, 74. Or excuse me, 75. Aaron Thursbury, Will Johnson. Dalton loves it. I'll say that. Dalton loves the Niners draft. If you're watching Casey, if you see this, you're going to be very happy with it if you're a fan of what Dalton has to say about that.
And I have an idea.
Okay.
Well, this might be an unpopular opinion.
All right. I'm here for
Jackson Dart still on the board.
Let's find out. Probably. He is, because because PFF like me thinks he's booty cheeks a little bit.
But here's my argument here.
Right.
Brock Purdy should not be getting $50 million a year. He's not a $50 million a year quarterback.
You're correct about that. Yes, I agree.
Can Jackson Dart on a rookie deal pretty much do? I mean, you could franchise tag Purdy for a year and bring Dart along. I mean, do we really think that Dart physically and even mentally, do we really think there's anything in their offense that they ask Purdy to do that Jackson Dart can't do?
I think theoretically not. I think the second reaction stuff from Purdy is better than Dart, just because I think Dart, he obviously has the same thing that Purdy kind of had going on, where like the first read's not open, I'm just going to run around and do shit, which is what Dart does, admittedly. But I think Purdy's gotten, granted, that's come with time, but he's gotten much better at figuring stuff out and not being as erratic. But I see the vision. I do. I think just if I was going to do that, like Dart is a better athlete other than Milroe than everyone here, for sure. That's a quarterback. So I think that factors into it. I just have higher grades than other quarterbacks, but for the Niners system specifically, I think Dart, if he's going to be successful as a player early on in his career, it probably has to come in that type of system.
Yeah.
Admittedly.
Milroe's the only quarterback here I have a higher grade on than Dart. But that's simple, but
that's all just traits.
Yeah, and Milroe, like, it has to be the right fit. And I think both Milroe and Dart are kind of like that. I think this fit makes more sense for Dart.
I mean, I'm good with it. I am, admittedly, but
I don't know. Do you have any other ideas here?
I would have probably said, because we've attacked tackle, corner, I would have attacked interior defensive line personally. I know you like Deion Walker more than me. That feels like something they wouldn't do. I will say this has been cleared out quickly, the interior defensive line group. So that does kind of put a damper into that. I mean, the edge group is still, outside of Bosa, is kind of lacking. But, I mean, are we taking any of these guys here over a dart throw quarterback if we're us?
Dart throw.
Dude, the amount of times I've heard that this week, I just can't. I didn't even mean to do it. Honestly, if you want to do Dart, I know that he's higher graded for you than me as well. So I get it. Like, I like the idea of a Kyle McCord type in that offense that's more willing to push the ball down the field with accuracy and timing, but he doesn't offer the play extension that Dart would offer, that Purdy also offers. So kind of, it's not as good of a fit, admittedly. Yeah. But I'm good with Dart if you want to do it. Yeah. Why not?
Yeah. Casey is officially unhappy with this draft.
Oh, yeah, probably. Also, just want to say the Pats have drafted Quinshon Judkins and Dylan Sampson so far.
Nice.
So, again, something with PFF, they have – I think they have an uncomfortable obsession with creating incredible backfields or potentially incredible backfields. Which, again, like on a spiritual level, I agree with. On a real level, can't say I can get down with it.
Jordan Birch to the Cowboys at 78 or 76. Wow.
Talk about different types of edge rushers on the same team. That's all I'll say there. Cardinals at 78 though. So again, just to recap, we got the Texas boys. Do we take no? Is take all Texas guys?
Don't actually.
I mean, it's not the worst idea in the world, but I'm probably not
Honestly,
doing that.
Like in that situation, you just tell Cameron Williams, like, "Hey, you're a guard now, buddy."
Yeah, you better learn guard, which again, not saying I'm 100%. Again, I would probably rather take 7 IE and play him at guard personally. I will say that if we're doing the
My only
guard
thing
tackle
is
to
I
guard
just don't
thing.
know if he's mean enough to play guard.
We've talked about this, yeah, unfortunately, with Wyatt Milam, someone like that.
Yeah.
Charles Grant had himself at the combine, I thought, too, which is good for him. He needs it because of his. He somehow, I think he was like taller than he was listed at William Mary, which I don't understand how in the world that happened because normally it's the opposite. But good for him also, and then he had like longer arms than most.
Here's the idea: maybe like small school. They didn't have like a lot of like technology to measure him.
Technology is awesome.
It was just some really short athletic trainer doing the measurements that just like struggled to like get his height accurately.
Hey, listen, I've heard crazier things before. So
Like it was just like
it.
some like 5'2" lady doing the measurements, and she's like on a step stool, and they didn't have a very big step stool, and so she was just kind of eyeballing it.
I've heard crazier things, so I'm not going to say that that's not possible, but yeah, I think that would make some sense. Maybe, hey, you know what? Maybe it's I will say with him that he had really good measurements, so I'm curious. Also, the Steelers, admittedly, and again, I don't want to talk about the Steelers on a show that there's nothing to do with them, but they are meeting with him apparently, and I'm like, if you're going to draft an offensive lineman in this class later in the draft, that's a guy I can get behind, so I'll take that. But no, I think if we're going the tackle to guard convert, I mean, Williams does make sense, but like, do we really want to do the meme with the 3 Texas players? Maybe.
We definitely think offensive line, or like
I'd love to go interior, but but I just the talent left there. Like we could just do Walker. I know you're higher on him than me.
Yeah, I could also see like just defensive talent in general. Like
for sure.
A D lineman, but just like
if we're doing
Castro, I like the idea because they need everything. I feel
they kind of do. Defense. I mean, if we're just going down the board, like I think linebackers, like you could add a linebacker, but I don't know if I'm doing that at this point. I don't know if you need to do that. Winston. I mean, I like the safeties. Like Castro's more of a slot corner type than a safety type. Like Winston is a good player, obviously. We know that. I'm not a big fan of Ransom. Who else is on the board here? A lot of offensive guys. Dorian Strong is top corner, I think they have here. Who else is a corner? I'm curious because their corners played kind of better than I would have thought, but I mean, I don't know. I'm not a big fan of the guys on the board here. Why is okay. Anyway, moving on from that. I mean, Castro does make. I mean, as a slot type, that does make some sense, but I can't remember who was manning the slot for them most of last year. I feel like it was it Garrett Williams, or did he move out to the outside now? Out of Syracuse, they drafted. I'm not 100% sure. Because Castro could definitely be a good fit.
Yeah, let me double check what they had. Last year, their nickel was Williams is listed as their nickel.
Okay.
Their other corners are Sean Murphy, Bunting, and Sterling Thomas.
Okay, well, corner can definitely be a thing, but
they did draft Max Melton last year.
That's true. I was a pretty big fan of him, but if they want to move Garrett, well, you could move Garrett Williams back outside, which is where he played in college. But I want to say he played really well in the nickel last year, so they're an interesting, like defensive wise. Like I kind of think the secondary is the only strength of that team.
Yeah.
So I kind of want to go away. I mean, with linebackers, here's a linebacker right now on the board.
I mean, do they need any offensive weapons?
I was thinking receiver because, like, it's Michael Wilson and Marvin Harrison Jr. and then kind of everyone else. You do have Trey McBride at tight end too, but like Jalen Noel would be an interesting one.
Yeah,
because
well,
he ran.
You don't like Greg Dortch?
I love Greg Dortch, but Greg Dortch is kind of a meme because he's Greg Dortch. You know, there's a reason why everybody's like, you don't love Greg Dortch, just because it's Greg Dortch. You know, not sure if I'm not taking a receiver here just because Greg Dortch is on the team, admittedly.
Yeah.
Noel surprised me with his 40 because we talked about this in the receiver rankings where I just didn't know if his play style in college, where he was really more of a vertical slot weapon, a lot of the time was going to play. And then he ran a freaking 4.3 now. So like, maybe I'm just full of shit. You know, that's kind of where I'm at. I'm going to have to rewatch him again because I'm like, if the stuff he was doing at Iowa State could translate, then yeah, we can get on board with this guy a little bit more, like a little higher up the board.
What else could be fun? Savion Williams,
true offensive weapon type instead of a true just receiver.
He worked out he did the running back drills.
He did too. Yeah, I mean he should. It's kind of what he played oftentimes. So
yeah,
that makes sense. Royals really impressed me with the way he ran too, which I was really happy to see because I like him a lot, but I was kind of not sure about the top end speed. Still not sure about it because the tape is kind of what it is, but. You know, I like a lot. Oh, by the way, Tez Johnson, you can't run a 4.55 at 154 pounds. You just can't. Here's the thing. He looks exactly the same as he did when he was doing the drills. Like, he looks explosive. He looks fast. I don't know how much it matters, but he just doesn't look good, you know? When you're 154 pounds and you run the 40 and the 4.5s, it's just not a great look. You know, it doesn't mean anything necessarily. I know somebody, Dalton, that I'm sure you're still higher on than me, at least, obviously. Isaiah Bond's still sitting here.
I mean, Bond sitting here at 78 is kind of insane.
Yeah. PFF is admittedly more on my kind of wavelength with him, which, you know, I'm not saying that's good by any means, by the way, but that is just kind of the reality of it for this mock draft.
In that offense, I do think having somebody that could play inside out, I think you could create a lot of problems with the trio of him, Wilson, and Marvin Harrison Jr.
I mean, I will say, because we are like in the third round at this point, I'll let you have it if you think he's the best fit at receiver, because I do think receiver is where I want to go.
Yeah, and I think he's by far the best receiver.
Right, exactly, yeah. So we'll throw him up there. All right. And then, funnily enough, Jalen Noel goes right the next pick to Washington. So there you go. Maybe it would have been Bond there. But Seahawks up here. Again, we took Donovan Jackson, Carson Schlesinger. I think at this point, looking for probably edge or just more kind of help on defense still, I think, honestly. Maybe you look at receiver, though, because there's been rumors about DK Metcalf's availability. What's Tyler Lockett going to do moving forward? So that's an option too. I want to throw up, like I said, edge too. A lot of edges are off the board at this point, though. So that kind of makes it a little bit harder, I would say. I'm thinking.
Also, a thought here.
Yeah.
Like Jalen Milroe. I don't hate the idea of because we don't know if
Gino's future. Yeah.
Gino's gonna be back. And for a team like Seattle, that I mean, their identity is pretty much even since Pete Carroll, it's been we're going to run the ball well and we're going to play really good defense.
Yeah, and then we're going to bomb the football when we can.
Yeah.
So, which if there's one thing Milroe can probably do as a passer right now, it's bomb the football down the field.
I could see it fitting.
I could. I think it just comes down to what the future of Geno Smith is with the Seahawks, because I personally think that they should either trade him now while he still has value, or they should commit to him for a couple more years to open a window up, because I don't think you're probably going to improve upon him, at least with any likelihood, unless you have a higher pick than you have right now in the future.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. I just don't know what the ceiling on him with that team is.
I don't know either, but I think they do need to make a decision and stop playing it halfway, because he keeps coming up in these discussions, and that doesn't necessarily mean the Seahawks are having all these discussions all the time. But if the Giants were willing to offer you a day 2 pick, to get out from and start over at quarterback, whether it's in this draft or a different free agent or something. I don't know if you're going to necessarily get that same type of offer in a year or two, right?
Yeah.
And like then you might be in the same position you're in now where you like Geno, but you don't know if he's going to be the quarterback for you long term. Might as well get an asset while you can, right? Like the problem just becomes who's going to be the starter this year, because you do have to solve that. Maybe that's a free agent, maybe it's rookie, whatever. But I think that that's on the horizon either way.
Yeah.
So taking Milroe here does make sense at just taking a dart throw. Like if we assumed, for example, that they did move off of Geno and they're just going to stream a veteran for now, you want to take a guy that has upside. Milroe would make sense here.
Yeah. Or if they continue to just kick the can down the road for another year with Geno,
Yeah, you have a
make sense.
Exactly. Yeah. So because you're going to turn to whatever the UNC kid that's there now behind him. What the Sam Howell?
Oh,
You gonna turn to Sam Howell? No, probably not.
No.
So I'm good with Milroe if you're good with that.
I'm good with that, yeah.
All right, let's do it. And then what I believe will be we have 2 picks at the end here for the compensatory picks here. But the Rams up again here to recap. We just have Matthew Golden because they gave their 2nd-round pick for Braden Fisk, who admittedly, I will say, had obviously very good rookie season production-wise. I still think a lot of it has to do with the way that they schemed him up. But, hey, they used his abilities to the best of it, and they got the value out of it they wanted. So I got to give the Rams a lot of credit for knowing how to unlock what he's able to do as an athlete. So could end up – it looks like it's going to end up being just a fine trade despite everything they gave up to get him.
Yeah.
But at pick 90 here, though, with their 2nd pick, we did go Matthew Golden. I do think tight end is still in play here. I want to say, okay, Harold Fannin is still here. We talked about how he disappointed at the combine, but he's sitting there. Gunnar Helm is here too, which I think this is kind of the range for him too. Like the back end of day 2, I think you're going to see a couple more tight ends go besides the top guys here. That's definitely an option. Offensive line, for sure, is still an option for this team. I think they need to kind of get some depth, especially with all the injuries they had last year that kind of derailed the middle of their season. You have guys like Wyatt Milam, Charles Grant. I forget who their center currently is, but you have Jared Wilson, who tested out of this world, by the way. Good for him. Really explosive.
Crazy.
Yeah, so definitely options here. Tate Radledge score actually same thing. He was very athletic at the combine too.
So what did you say Helm ran at the combine? 4.9?
It was like a 4.8. I think his second one was like 4.8, but again, he did have an ugly ankle.
It's been diagnosed. It's a sprained ankle.
It looked. Did you see the pictures of it? It looks. He looks jacked up. It looks jacked up.
That means, still, man's a big person running sub 4 or running sub 5 on a sprained ankle.
Yeah, I thought he was going to be more like a 4.6 guy coming into it, and he probably would have been based on that.
That's impressive, and he'd be a fun weapon.
That's kind of where I'm at with it too. So I think that would be my pick here.
Yeah.
Because again, I think this team needs to restock in the weapon category while Stafford's still here.
Yeah, and if you're trying to win in the next 2 years, I think you added a lot to the defense to make that area, that side of the ball, competent enough.
A healthy offensive line should be good enough too, if they can get it healthy. So
I mean, I think they can still get better against the run, but I think they've also invested enough assets in defensive tackle. They just invested them all in a really small defensive tackle that can't help them against the run.
Yeah, but there's guys that might be. Obviously, we won't go much farther. We will be at 100. There could be a guy that we like as a run stuffer in the next pick.
Yeah, but I like Helm here.
All right, let's go home. And then our final 2 picks here with the Niners 99 and the Rams at 100. So to recap, Niners have Will Johnson, Arion Ursary, Jackson Dart, and pick 99. I think we do one of 2 things. Okay, Deebo Samuel is now off this team. They could look to add another weapon. I know they took a receiver in the first round, Ricky Pearsall last year. Savion Williams is staring us in the face. I know you're looking at him for sure.
I was just thinking that.
With
replacing Deebo Samuel, I can't think of a better replacement for him in this class.
Yeah, skill set wise, definitely makes a lot of sense. The versatility to play in the backfield, play out wide, play in the slot, play Wildcat quarterback, like kind of do everything. I will say, if we wanted to live up to what the Niners do, we would take a mid running back here with their third round pick because that's what they do. Now, we're not going to do that, I don't think, because this is what we would do. But I just need to throw out there that for some reason, the Niners love setting third round picks on absolute fire every draft for no apparent reason. But then they'll draft Brock Purdy, who admittedly not the biggest fan of, but is still a very good starting NFL quarterback currently in the 7th round. So make sense, Niners fans. Yeah. I don't get you guys sometimes. But anyway, not going to get into that too much. I do think Xavier Williams is the very obvious pick here. Yeah, we'll just run that card in here. Dolphins took big tackle. We love it, Anthony. They took it. Also, the Saints drafting Tez Johnson. What are we doing?
Oh, he'll with Derek Carr, he'll have 1,000 yards.
That's actually that's true. Oh, good. The Steelers took a tight end when we have like 4 on the roster already. That's good. Yeah. All right, good job, guys.
An undersized receiver that doesn't run very fast.
Yeah, we love it.
It works for Derek. That's the thing with Derek Carr. Doesn't win a lot of games with Devontae Adams. But you know who he does have success with? Hunter Renfrow and Nelson Aguilar.
It's true. Something about it. He just likes him that way. I don't know. Anyway, Rams up here now. I think we do go to the defensive interior to see what's kicking around. Deion Walker's still sitting there. Jamari Caldwell, I know I'm a big fan of him. I forget where you had him, but honestly, I think he'd be a good fit. But
he is
exactly what they need. That's the thing. Is like he's quite literally exactly what they need because he
put him next to Braden Fisk, and then let Braden Fisk actually like not get double teamed a lot.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's perfect. That's literally the perfect fit.
Yeah, and you compare him with Kobe Turner too. Like you have a 3-deep rotation there. He's the true nose tackle in that system. Then, like they have some guys that played that role, but I forget the name of one of them, but I think he's a free agent. The one that played, I think, the most snaps there last year. So I think Caldwell makes the most sense of this group here.
They don't have one with Caldwell's upside, and let's put it that way.
Yeah, for sure. So let's throw Caldwell up here. So that will do it for us for the NFC West. Fun draft. It was still a lot of weird stuff. I will say that. We still have that going on. Like Luther Burden at 4, like I like Luther Burden, I like to say. Like I think I'm not afraid to say that's a good football player, obviously.
Yeah.
Number 4?
Yeah. 14 would be like the ceiling.
I would say so. Like I think once you start getting in the middle of the first round, it's like, all right, like he's an electric player. Like I could even see a team like the Niners saying, all right, we're gonna do the thing again with Debo. Like we're gonna do the Debo thing again. Now that's too early for them, I think, to do that, but it at least makes some sense.
Jahdae Barron at 10.
That's actually based on like recent mocks I've seen. That's closer to consensus, not 10, but that range than I think we are going to be. To his credit, dude ran like the wind at the combine, so maybe he can stick it outside. That does raise his profile, depending on the scheme he plays in. But yeah, I guess we didn't really look too much at the first round. James Pierce at 9 it's funny because it's the Saints where it's like now that Dennis Allen's not there, they can take actual like edge rushers that can win the corner. So that one I'm not as mad about, but it is funny that that's not the edge they would really take.
Yeah.
Tyler Warren to the Cowboys, very fun. Not necessary probably for them, but Mike Green, Kelvin Banks we took.
Who ended up Genty pulled the Bengals. That makes a lot of sense.
Derek Harmon a pick before I would wish he would go, which in the granted Sanders falling is fun, but like this is kind of what I'm still hoping for here. Kenneth Grant to the Chargers, that might be the most actual normal pick somehow is the fact that Kenneth Grant's a Charger.
But I think they would go Loveland in that scenario.
I think so too, but that's it's a Michigan guy probably either way.
Yeah.
I mean, not too much weird stuff in the first round. Like Jalen Walker's obviously going much higher than this. We know that. Shamar Stewart too, because they're freaks. And guess what? Freaks get drafted higher, guys. That's what it is. Like, I appreciate the more grinded out guys, but they don't get drafted in the first round typically.
No.
I hate to break it to you. And it's so funny this time of year where like the combine happens and everybody's like, "Oh, my favorite player! I can't wait to see him." And then he's like not an athlete at all, and they're like, "Oh, well, he's got the heart." And I'm like, "Listen, that works for like 3 guys a year. All right, like probably Scadova is going to be one of them. I hope one of them is Aeneas Peebles just because he's fun to watch, something like that. But it's mostly not going to be those guys. I hate to break it to you guys. It's but it is what it is. But that'll do it for us for this week as far as the mock drafts go. Next week we will be doing the AFC West. Dalton, you will be able to control, at least you and Jake mostly, because I'll default to you guys a lot of the time with the Raiders at least. You'll be able to control the PFF mock drafts. You won't be able to, or you won't have to sit back and watch them do whatever it is they do to the Raiders for some reason. I think you've drafted Dylan Gabriel like almost every one of these episodes somehow.
Yeah, I don't know why they do that. Dylan Gabriel is probably not an NFL quarterback. Like I said, Dylan Gabriel is either Drew Brees or he's a CFL quarterback.
Yeah, I do worry that that's the range, and that's not good because the middle range doesn't exist there, man. It just doesn't.
No.
He'll be fine if he gets drafted to like 4 different teams probably. And then if he doesn't get drafted to one of those teams, probably not going to work out so well. And that's just not really great process when you're you're drafting quarterbacks. Yeah, and I fear the Raiders isn't one of those teams.
Did he measure at the combine?
I think he did at the Senior Bowl too, but I think he's under 6 foot, or maybe right at 6 foot and like 200 pounds. I think. I'm not 100% sure.
Yeah, a lot of the quarterbacks didn't do a lot of the.
They didn't do nothing, a lot of them.
No. Which
disappointed me. Although it makes sense, I'm not surprised. It's still disappointing.
Yeah. But they did measure Gabriel and 5'11".
5'11". Mm-hmm.
And 9 1/4 hands.
Which is incredible considering, honestly.
Yeah.
Like bigger than Jalen Milroe's hand. Well, I guess Jalen Milroe, his hand size measured in better at the combine, which make sense to me. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah. Teach me how to do that. The stretching must be nice. Anyway, again, that'll do it for us this week. We'll have the AFC West for you guys next week. And then we will get into the edge and linebacker rankings the week after, which I'm sure will be a lot of fun, at least for the edge ranking part. We'll see about linebacker. I'm a little bit more hopeful. I saw some good stuff from some of the linebackers in the combine, but we'll see. It's always a tough position because it's either like freak athletes who don't know how to play the position or guys who probably aren't fast enough to do a lot of things. That's typically how it works nowadays, but this group might be a little different. We'll see. Any last thoughts you want to throw out there, Dalton, other than your disdain for the PFF mock draft simulator?
No.
That's the biggest yet.
PFF figured out, like, I even watched their Raiders mock that they did. You know, they did like a mock for every team, and they kept having to take players that weren't there or not take players that fell because they're I think Cam Ward fell to them in the simulator and they didn't take him because they didn't think he would actually be there. So they took Ashton Genty. Really weird.
I don't know. It's interesting, but
yeah. But the fact that they decided to have the Raiders take Ashton Genty at 6 tells me that PFF just loves running backs also.
Maybe they do. I mean, if you're going to love a running back, this is the year to do it, I suppose, but maybe not that much, guys. Maybe tone it down a little bit. But no, that'll do it for us this week.